To the Point with your host, News Channel 5's Kelly Dunn.
Good morning. The bubble burst several years ago, and the housing industry still has not recovered. Home values dropped to new lows. Mortgages adjusted. Foreclosures skyrocketed. The last few years have been challenging for some, disastrous for others. Is now the time to buy a house? Is it time to sell? And what about financing? Can you even get it? There are a lot of questions, and today on To the Point, we're going to try to help get you some answers. And joining me right now is Sherry Olafson, a real estate attorney and author of the book Foreclosure Nation. Sherry, thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kelly.
This is such a topic that affects everyone. You can imagine the people watching right now, a lot of them, we're going to be talking about their situations.
Right.
Let's begin first with buyers or those waiting on the sidelines. Who's winning right now?
Well, you know, it's interesting because in a sense, obviously, we all know that this is a buyer's market. But for sellers, there's always an upside opportunity. You only lose when you sell. So if you're able to hold on to your home, there will be some appreciation coming up in the market soon. Now, here in South Florida, we're looking at probably 2015 before we really see that. But just as much as it hurt when we lost that value in our home,
right,
we do have some silver linings to look forward to in the next few years as the values go back up.
Have we hit bottom?
I don't think so. Not here in South Florida. Most of the so-called experts, Fiserv and Standard & Poor, are predicting that between now and the end of 2011, depending on where in Florida you are, your home values will probably go down anywhere from 7 to 16%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how bad is this? Give us some perspective. Is this, you know, in how many generations and how many years? How bad? When was it this bad before?
I'm going to tell you the sort of bad news, then I'm going to tell you the really bad news.
Oh, great.
And then I'm going to tell you the good news.
Okay.
The sort of bad news is what we've all been hearing about, and those are sort of the numbers, the home prices, the foreclosures, the inventory, the number of sales. Those are all not great numbers here in South Florida. The good news with that, though, is that we've seen the biggest hit. They're still home prices are still going down. Home sales are still sort of bumping along the bottom. Inventory is still higher than usual.
Right.
And foreclosures, we know, are still high here in Florida. The really bad news is unemployment and the fact that a lot of these issues have been building for a long time. This is not a new problem. We know housing since 2006 has been a problem, but unemployment began becoming a problem in the 1960s when we started shipping these jobs offshore. We actually have 4 million kids every year trying to get into the workforce, but we only have 3 million old folks getting out, which is a serious problem. Now, the good part is we know it's a problem now, because for such a long time we've had sort of things in our economy hiding that, and we didn't really realize it. Now that we know it, we do have leaders in Washington and in our state of Florida who are working to address those problems.
So were home prices in the early 2000s, and were they just ridiculously high and begging to come down?
It sure looks that way now.
Yeah.
But let's look at housing in terms of the big picture, because housing is not a short-term investment. Housing, to really be an investment, needs to be you need to look at it in the long term. Now, over the last 10 years, home prices in Florida have appreciated by 50%, even with the bubble and with the decrease in prices.
Really?
Over the last 30 years in Florida, our home values have gone up over 200%. So, believe it or not, Florida real estate is still a good deal in the big picture.
Yet, I think the statistics are that 4 of every 10 homes are underwater. And you can't refinance a home that's underwater.
No.
And, you know, if you lose a job, if your spouse has some sort of issue, you know, maybe part of their salary is cut, that sort of thing. I mean, this could be a really dicey situation.
Well, and you know what, Kelly, when homes are underwater, it creates a cycle that we call an adverse feedback cycle, because people are underwater, and because of that, they oftentimes, once you reach about 15% negative equity, people are far more likely to walk away from their homes. Well, that in turn causes more foreclosures, which brings down home values. For every foreclosure in your neighborhood, your value will go down about 1%. So that drives more people underwater, and it just creates that cycle that keeps continuing.
So who can help these people?
Well, if you're underwater, people are underwater for different reasons. Some people may have bought at a high time. Other people may have refinanced and cashed money out. But, you know, in most of those situations, people who are underwater need to look at how soon it will be before that equity recovers. And again, here in Florida, we're looking at about 2015 to 2020 before most people start seeing positive. In other words, they make up that lost money and they start seeing positive appreciation. Walking away from most people is not a good alternative, and you have to be very, very careful, because there are a lot of lawyers. There are some good lawyers out there, but there are a lot of lawyers out there who their agenda is to get you in as a client, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. They're making a living, and they're encouraging people wrongly to walk away from their mortgages. People need to really make sure they get several opinions before they make a move like that.
Well, what about a modification? That seems like the solution for a lot of people, and there are plenty of lawyers and other organizations out there saying, hey, I can help modify your mortgage.
Again, that, right, and you hit the nail on the head in terms of that agenda that you have to be careful of, because most of them are not going to do that for free, meaning they're making money and they have another alternative for wanting to bring you in the door. Most people who apply for modifications, depending on the program, are not actually getting them. And that's because if you can pay your mortgage, you're not supposed to get a modification. Just because you're underwater does not mean that the bank is going to modify your loan. On the other hand, if you just can't ever, you're not ever going to be able to afford that home. I mean, let's face it, some of us really stretched. And just because the mortgage payment goes down, you're still going to have high taxes and insurance. And, I mean, shoot, your air conditioning bill on a house that's too big for you is just going to be unaffordable. If you're in that situation, a modification is also not for you, because it's not what we call sustainable. It's not going to really help you keep your home long term. So modifications are a solution for some people. We're seeing more and more that short sales are really an alternative for people who just really shouldn't be in that home.
And what happens in a short sale? I think a lot of people have heard the term, may not realize what goes on.
Right. Well, essentially, you list your property, hopefully with a realtor who's familiar with short sales and understands the dynamics there, because in addition to, say, you, a buyer, and me, a seller, being at the table, there's a third party, and that's your bank. So if we have an offer and a contract we want to have approved, but it's for less than the amount that it's going to cost to pay off the loan, then we have to bring the bank in and get their consent to do that deal, because they're going to be taking what we call a haircut, meaning they're not going to get paid off in full either. The one thing you need to be careful of is sometimes they will release you from the responsibility for that additional money, which we call the deficiency, and sometimes they won't, and you need to know which type of a deal you're getting.
And so you could leave that home and carry with you thousands of dollars.
For 20 years in the state of Florida. We call those ticking financial time bombs, because they will catch up with a lot of people who don't realize that they have them.
On the other end of the spectrum, how hard is it to get a mortgage these days if you are interested in buying a home?
You know, that's such an interesting question, because we're hearing all the time about how interest rates are so low, and really career-breaking low. We will never see interest rates this low again. The problem is that because of what so many folks have been through with credit problems and employment problems, very few folks can actually qualify for those very, very low rates. But now is a good time to refinance if you have the equity in your home and can do it, or if you're okay, frankly, paying down that equity a little bit, if you have the resources to do that and you can get a better mortgage rate. Remember, when you're looking at your home, there's two things that are important. It's the value of your home, but it's also the terms of that mortgage, because you can actually save as much money on a mortgage over the years that you own your home than you would be making on the home itself. So it's very important that you go for those good terms. 15-year loans, if you can do them now. Fixed rate loans, if you can do them now. It's a great opportunity.
Oh, yeah, fixed rate. Yeah, we didn't even talk about adjustables, and there's a whole lot of those coming due within the next few years. So
right.
The beat goes on. Coming up next, what you can do if you are facing foreclosure. Welcome back. The focus of today's show is the housing situation and the number of people facing the possibility of losing their homes. What can you do if you're one of them? Joining us now with some answers are Andre Lewis. He is the housing director at the Urban League of Palm Beach County. Also, Maggie Sarubi is a real estate agent in our area. And again, Sherry Olafson is continuing to stay with us for the rest of the program. Let's begin, Andre, with you. You work with people facing foreclosure, and talk about the human side of foreclosure. It's not just about a structure.
Yeah, it's not just about the numbers. We tend to focus on negative principles, market values, but there are people out there that have put what we call sweat equity into their homes. This is their home. You know, they've painted it the way they wanted it to look. You know, they've put a lot of investment into it, and I've seen families being affected by foreclosure and the possibility of them losing their home. I've seen families on the brink of divorce because, you know, in our society, the man is the head of the household, and he should take care of the house, and we should be sheltered. And, you know, these dynamics are breaking down our family structure, and that's the human side. Those are the stories that we hear every day at the Urban League of Palm Beach County that you might not see when you watch CNN or C-SPAN and those other things. They talk about the economy and what's going on.
Yeah, it's just not poor people either. I mean, this has really gone across the board, and I know, Maggie, you sell on Palm Beach, in addition in Palm Beach County. I mean, this is stuff that's affecting even people that have some means.
It affects all different price brackets in our economy, but there is hope. You know, we've had a very successful rate of closing short sales. I do want to add a glimmer of hope, even though it is a very difficult process. It does happen. You are able to initiate a short sale, and with the help of professionals that are familiar with the process, you can see the closing, and you can sell your home successfully. So I do want to add that, you know, there is a very high possibility that does happen.
And that's certainly less of a hit, right, than a foreclosure on your record.
Much better on your credit. And I think Maggie hit on a great point that, you know, being in foreclosure in and of itself is not the end of the world. It's really just the beginning of a process, and the way you handle that is very important, which includes finding a qualified realtor. It includes opening your mail, responding to the bank, and being proactive about it. You can make a bad situation a little bit better as opposed to a whole lot worse by the way you handle it.
It's just a shame, and I think we were just so accustomed to the way that everything went, and everybody had equity in their homes, and they felt like they were rich because of what they had in their homes. And it has really, I mean, it's a paradigm shift.
Well, and you know what? The really interesting piece of that is, because Andre was talking about the human element of this, and here's the truth, is that 70% of the middle class had their equity in their home ownership. 2/3 of our homeowners were middle class. That equity's gone. And that was a safety net that kept the middle class from slipping here down to here. We've already got poverty levels at 46 million people in this country, almost a 40% growth in suburban poverty. That's not inner city poverty. That's suburbs like West Palm Beach. It's huge. We've got 1 million kids on food stamps. We've got 7.5 million kids now living with their grandparents because their parents are unemployed or for whatever other reason can't afford to support them. With that safety net gone, you know, it's scary now. It could get significantly worse if the government doesn't do something particularly about employment.
And you can step in as the Urban League, sure. And your organization can step in and help people. How?
Yes, we can. Our organization and the housing department that I work in, what we do, we bring a client and a family that's in crisis, and we look at your budget. We look at your situation and tell you the reality of your situation. What can you qualify for? Everybody, the buzzword today is modification. But in all intensive terms, that might not fit you. That might not fit your situation, and your bank might not agree to that. So we go down to the soup and nuts and the nuts and bolts, and we break it down and say, listen, yes, you fall in that category for HAMP modification, which would be the president's plan, and we would do the number structure for that.
Right.
So, but definitely, and just to kind of piggyback on what you touched on, and unemployment is at 12% right now in Florida. Unemployment is an economic lagging indicator. So this is the last to turn around, and this is what we need stable so that our clients can sustain home ownership. So these are the concerns.
And Maggie, do you see that people are now just so cautious because they know how bad things are? I mean, do you have a different buyer now that you're dealing with?
There really isn't a different buyer, but there is that frustration level, and when you're looking to purchase a short sale, that there's a lot of uncertainty. And you have to really educate the buyer and letting them know that although we have negotiated and have submitted offers to the bank for purchase, that there's really no guarantee. The good news is that it has been streamlined more since the beginning of the short sales, and we're seeing that the banks are better equipped to deal with them, and the response period is a lot quicker. So it's very important that the seller does the right preparation up front, that they submit all of their documents so that it helps facilitate that process when the buyer comes in. Once the property is priced correctly, because that is key, offers will come in and we can start the process and secure a closing.
All right, very good. We have more to talk about on this housing crisis coming up right after this. We are talking about housing this morning, and as we have been mentioning, that this has been totally devastating to families, not just the couples who bought the home, but to the entire family, and in many cases, the extended family. Andre, you were making a point during the break that if someone is in crisis, they really need to find someone who knows what they're doing and is HUD certified.
Exactly. If you know you're in crisis, you've received foreclosure notice, please contact the Urban League of Palm Beach County or any HUD-certified housing counseling agency. It's very important. Their services are free. And be leery of people that charge you fees. And I know we've all seen those commercials, but it's really true. There are people that are taking advantage of a bad situation and making money off of the sweat equity, as we talked about earlier, of individuals, and it's pretty disheartening.
Has this really changed the real estate industry, Maggie? I mean, just the way of buying and selling. Has everything changed?
It's changed dramatically, but with change you have to acclimate yourself and understand how to move real estate in this type of market. And a short sale does still remain a very viable option for sellers to sell their home if the loan modifications and other processes do not work for them. So the best advice I can give is to be prepared, make sure you have all of the documents that you need, communicate with your lender. When you do decide to short sale the property, ensure that you deal with professionals that are aware of the process, because it's very complex.
How soon can you buy a house after you short sell your existing home?
Fannie Mae has a new program, so they allow you to do that after 2 years. Or a deed in lieu, which is where you give the bank the deed to the property and then they let you go away. That's after 3 years, versus a foreclosure, which could hold you up for another 8 years.
But because there's so many foreclosures, has that even lessened a little bit? I mean, it used to be it was foreclosed, they foreclosed. I mean, it was the dirty little secret. I remember growing up thinking, foreclosure, oh my gosh.
Totally.
Now
before this, none of us really knew people who were in foreclosure.
Right.
And that's an important thing also for viewers to keep in mind, that this is not your grandfather's foreclosure with all of the social stigmas attached. And this, I'm calling this period the Great American Do-Over. The next 2 or 3 years, we will all really have an opportunity, those of us who ran into trouble, to get a second chance and get it right. But again, you need to be proactive about it. I think when people look back 5 or 6 years from now, in retrospect on this period, it's going to be a very forgiving time for people who ran into tough situations, because so many people did. But, in doing that, there are some golden rules that people need to remember, sort of the things that our grandparents thought about that would have kept us out of trouble in the first place, because we see so many people rushing out, trying to rush out of their home just as quickly as they rushed in, without being careful about who they trusted, without reading everything before they signed it, without thinking, geez, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Those are just the common sense things that people can keep in mind and save more heartache.
For those who aren't maybe right on the brink of foreclosure, the people with the underwater mortgages, that sort of thing, is there anything they can do to get a bank's attention to say, okay, I need help, or I'm going to need help, I know, if my mortgage adjusts, or I'm not going to be able to afford this forever, and I know it's my fault, but what can I do? Can you get their attention?
Short of a mask and a gun, which we're not advocating, it's very difficult to get a bank's attention. I mean, they're just overwhelmed. And when you speak with banks, I mean, Andre, you deal with this all the time. You're dealing with a servicer on the other end of the line who has the anonymity of you not knowing him. There's no interpersonal relationship there. It's very, very, very intimidating.
Several lenders have plans for imminent default. That means not behind, but I probably am going to fall behind. But we're not seeing that as much as we would like to. I think this would stop us from compiling the situation more than it is. Let's address these individuals that are in imminent default, and so we can stop the bleeding, so to speak.
And you certainly don't recommend anyone fall behind if they can avoid it, because that is not. A lot of people think, oh, I'll just miss a couple payments.
If you're going to miss them, put them in your own escrow account so that you have them. Don't go out and spend them at the mall.
Exactly.
We'll be back to wrap it up on a positive note, we promise, after this. Final question for our panel today. Look into your crystal ball 6 months from now. What's our situation? Better? Worse?
Well, I think with work, we're going to get better. I facilitated a first-time home buyer class, and I said if we give our first-time home buyers the opportunity to gain that knowledge prior to entering into a mortgage, it'll be better.
Better situation. What do you think, Maggie?
Well, the foreclosures and the short sales will not go away. However, with the halt in the foreclosures, I think the short sales might be a stronger point for you to sell your property, since they're still viable properties to go after at very good prices.
What do you think, Sherry?
Definitely better. I mean, look, education is expensive. Anyone who's sent a kid to college knows that, and we've all had a really expensive education. The key is recognizing what it is that you have learned from this and applying it for the rest of your life.
Well, this isn't going away anytime soon. We'll have you all back at another time. Thank you very much for all of your expertise. And thank you for joining us. Have a great Sunday.